I'm going to break down death in 3 ways. The first level of death is separation from God. Because God is supposed to be man's life source, like an outlet and like a charger and a phone. The energy that mankind was supposed to function by was outsourced by God. So mankind is the phone and God is the charger. So when we were disconnected from God, we lost life. If I disconnect my phone and it's on 10% from God, from the charger, it'll only be a matter of time before the phone dies. What does it mean to die? It doesn't have energy anymore. It doesn't have literally means it doesn't have life. It doesn't have the ability to do what it's made to do. I can't call on a dead phone. It's inactive, inoperative. Yes, so mankind, now that's important to note, because if I say a phone is dead, I mean it's inoperative. What it means by man is dead is because we have to understand the operation of humankind. What was mankind created to be? Mankind was created to be the image and likeness of God. And so when a man dies, it means that man can no longer function in his image and likeness, meaning a man can no longer look like God. That means it's a dead man. Because when I say my phone is dead, I mean I can't use it. It is unusable. It's inoperative. I can't operate it. But that's based on what I know the phone should do. I should be able to call on my phone. A man should look like God. So when mankind died, they lost God as a source. You see, and so what they were once one, they should have been one with God, I should say, and they lost God as their source, and they died. The first level is that they were disconnected from God. The second level of death is the physical death, where all humankinds are literally dying slowly in the physical realm. It's because disobeying God brought mortality. This is the first death, mortality, that mankind cannot, because mankind was made to live forever. Mankind was made to be an everlasting creature, not an eternal creature, but an everlasting creature. Eternity and everlasting are 2 different things. Eternity means no past, no future. Everlasting means you had a beginning, but you'll never end. So mankind had a beginning, but God didn't want them to ever end, to go on forever. So the only eternal being is God. He never began, will never end. An everlasting being began, but won't end. So mankind, after losing the source, became mortal. What that means is that if I have my phone on a charger, it's at 100%. If I disconnect the phone from its charger, it'll slowly deteriorate into dying. That's what mankind is right now. That's why men live for 70 years or 80 years. Because we disconnected from God, we're just dying slowly in the physical realm. That's the first death. And then the second death, there's the first death and second death. The first death is physical mortality. The second death is eternal condemnation, where any man who at the end of their life, any man who lived their life separated from God and died the first death, and then there's so much more information that I have to plug in to make this make sense. The first death is physical mortality. The second death is spiritual condemnation, where at the end of the world, when Christ comes back, he's going to judge all men. And the men whose names are not written in a book that determines who lived with God and who lived apart from God, those that were found out that they lived apart from God will be cast into what's called, theologically speaking, the lake of fire, a literal lake of fire, where every creature that lived apart from God will be sent into for eternal, everlasting, I should say, condemnation, where they'll be burning in fire forever. And it's called the second death. Adam sinned, he's guilty of sin, he died, he was separated from God. And the first implication of this death is mortality, And by the way, mortality is the reason why we have sickness and disease and grief, because mankind lost God as a source. Sickness is a sign of a deteriorating body. Yes, sickness is a sign of lifelessness. When your body lost life because of the disconnection from God, sickness is like John G. Lake says, like a dose of death. When somebody's sick, it's like a dose of death. It's something that's trying to advance you into dying slowly. It's lifeless. It's something corrupted. The first death is physical mortality. The second death is eternal condemnation. Yes. So all mankind sinned in Adam. All mankind in Adam are guilty of sin, separated from God, mortal, and eternally condemned to the lake of fire. What this creates is a state of helplessness, I'll call it, for man. Because we're guilty of sin, deserving death. We are dying physically. And then we also are going to, if we die without God, we're going to also be condemned eternally. We're helpless at this state. Because we're at a state where we are, and by the way, that means after Adam, every man that's born has these sentences upon their life. They are guilty of sin and they are condemned to death. Mortal death or physical death and the second death. The first death and the second death. That's why there's sickness. That's why there's disease. That's why men don't live forever on this earth. We die. Why do we die? It's because of the sin that mankind chose. Separated us from our life source. So we began to die slowly. So mankind is under this condemnation. We're helpless. We can't help ourselves at this state. It's like committing a crime and the sentence is 20 years. At that point that he found you guilty, you can't help yourself. It's over. It will take what we call a savior. You're helpless. We're guilty of sin and we deserve death. Physically and eternally, we are dead. Separated from God. We lost our source. God can no longer be our Abba, Father, our source. We have to fend for ourselves. We are separated from God and corrupted and helpless. It doesn't matter what your life looks like. It doesn't matter if you have $2 trillion. You will die and go to hell without God. Okay, if you live life rich, you're still gonna die and go to hell. That's not a blessed life. Man is dead and in a helpless position. Mankind has fallen and they can't get up. Like the commercial, I've fallen, I can't get up. When an elderly person falls and can't get and falls and cannot get up, someone needs to help them. The reason why they can't get up is because they don't have the strength to stand. Mankind lost our strength because our strength is God himself. And so if we lost God and we fall, we can't get up because our legs were God. The strength of man was created to be God. Remember I said before, mankind was created weak by design so that they can depend on God. But if we lost God, what are we going to do? It would take a savior. Here we're going to talk about next, justification by faith. You see, when mankind sinned, became guilty of sin. And when we became guilty of sin, we were cast out of God's kingdom. Do you know that when somebody, at least in this country, becomes a convicted felon, they lose certain privileges? For example, they can no longer visit a penal facility. So that if I was in jail for 20 years and I get out, my brother's in jail, I can't visit him. They also can't vote anymore. Doesn't matter how zealous they are about politics, they can never vote again, ever again. I'm pretty positive that's true. And so they lose certain privileges. Now, worse than this, when mankind sinned and became a convicted felon, we didn't just lose privileges, we